Okay, we are following further along the way here in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And we'll actually be in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and chapter 9. A long passage here today, and we're not going to go over all of it, but we will show you parts of it all the way through. We're going to go with 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 down to verse 7 is where we're going to start out with, okay? 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 to verse 7. It is a privilege to stand here and to preach at Every Nation Baptist Church. It always is. And I do appreciate not having to worry about the church because Brother Ike DeFlesh is here. But you know, he just can't figure out his times. This is not morning. You know, he all the time says the morning service, the morning this. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, okay? So, well, it's after 2 o'clock now. But anyway, we appreciate him. All right, in chapter 8, verse 1, it says, "Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit." Now, that's an old way of saying we want you to know. We want you to know of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, how that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord and unto us by the will of God, insomuch that we desired Titus, that as he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace also. Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also. Now I want you to look back there at the phrase that is given to us in let's see, it's verse 4, where he said, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us, and here's the phrase, the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. The fellowship of the ministering to the saints. Okay, saints, that's Christians. If you believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, you're a saint. Some of you don't act, oh wait, I shouldn't say that. But some of us do not act exactly like we think a saint's supposed to act. But if you've been set apart unto God, by that I mean if you've been saved and you're a child of God, then the Bible calls you a saint. You can call me Saint Norm. Okay? We got Saint John, that sounds more normal, you know, like that. But Saint Norm doesn't sound all that. You know, Saint Becky, doesn't that sound good? That sounds good, right? But anyway, you've got this thing about the saints, and sometimes saints need to be ministered to. Sometimes we have needs. Sometimes our needs are met pretty good, but pretty well. But sometimes we have needs, and so we need to minister to one another. Well, when we do that as a group, we are fellowshipping. We take upon ourselves the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. That's one reason why we have a church, so that we can fellowship together and take care of all the saints and minister to the saints that are out there. This is, whether I should mention this, I don't know, but you have those movies that were called the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and what they did was the Fellowship of the Ring. They were all going to work together for a common cause. And that's what this idea is here, that there would be a working together of several different churches for a common cause, and that common cause was the ministering to the saints. Now, that's where we start out with here, but I want to explain a little bit more about that before we get into this passage. First, which saints were it? Well, that didn't sound right, was it? Which saints was it? What group of saints? That is better. What group of saints was it that needed ministering to? At this particular time, at this particular occasion, there was one group of Christians that were really having a hard time. Now, if we were trying to find somebody who was having a hard time right now, who would we say is having a hard time in this world right now among the saints? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I was agreeing.
Oh, you were. You're saying you were. Okay. All right.
Sort of like the Corinthians.
Huh?
Sort of like the Corinthians.
Okay. All right. Well. Okay. Let's talk bigger than that. Let's talk about in the world today. There are some people that are going through persecution, people that are dying for their faith, losing everything they have. Who are we thinking about here? Christians in the Middle East. I think we could look at them and say that would be true. Who else?
Brothers in China.
In China, there are places in China where there still are definitely those kind of problems. Anybody else here have something they think about when they think about it? Anything? Go ahead.
Myanmar.
And Myanmar, yes, it's very hard in that country, Burma. And Vietnam area, yes, we would say. There are Christians, some Montagnard Christians are having a hard time right now. And Akpui could tell you all about it. How about in America? Are we okay?
No.
Sort of yes, sort of no. I would say we're better than maybe some places, but you know, we have some needs. So guess what? There's some real opportunities for us to minister to the saints, take care of one another, is what I'm trying to say here. Okay, so the fellowship of the ministry to the saints. At that time, there was one big part of the world where there was a lot of Christians where they were having a hard time, and that place was Jerusalem. There was two reasons why they were having problems in Jerusalem. One was that there had been real heavy persecution of the Christians in Jerusalem. It had come about because of the fact that so many people became Christians there, and the Jewish establishment didn't like that, and so they came down really hard on them. You remember a guy by the name of Paul? How he went around and he grabbed Christians right out of their houses and threw them in jail. Some of them even died under his hand. You remember that happening? Remember when he got all that group together, or the whole big group got together, and they stoned Stephen to death? That's in Acts chapter 7. They took stones. They just couldn't handle the fact that he was preaching Christ, and they took those big stones and killed him. And that kind of thing was going on there. And it kept on going, so much so that people lost their homes, they lost their jobs, they had to escape to other places to live. It was good when they went other places. They went and preached Christ in those other places, and churches got started, but they themselves lost everything. That was what was going on in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem church. Every day they were having that problem. The second reason was that it was from Jerusalem that the first missionaries went out. The first apostles went out from there, and they took up money among themselves to send somebody. You know, they just couldn't put a credit card in their hand or just a little bit of money, because these people were going to go far, far away preaching the gospel. They needed a lot of money. And so among the believers in Jerusalem, they would pull every little bit of a dime they could, find every bit of money they possibly could, and put it all together and give to somebody, and they go out. Next thing you know, there'd be another one going. The next thing you know, there was another one. It wasn't long before everybody's pockets were empty, and they were really up against it. Now, God did take care of their daily needs. They prayed, "Give us this day our daily bread." God did take care of them, but they had lost a lot. And Paul got this idea. Paul got to thinking, you know, it would be a really good thing if I could take up an offering among the churches that are out here, that are Gentile churches, churches that he had started. If I could take up an offering and give it to that Jewish church there in Jerusalem, first they would have their needs met, and they would also understand the love that there is in Christ, Jew and Gentile, rich and poor, it doesn't matter. You know, race doesn't matter, background doesn't matter. We're all one in Christ. They might understand that better. And that's what he wanted to do. So he got this idea, and he started teaching the different churches what to do. Right here you have the teaching to the Corinthian church. But it's not the only place in the Bible where that is taught. Look back to 1 Corinthians chapter 16. Can you turn back there? In 1 Corinthians chapter 16, Paul told the Corinthian church a long time ago, before he wrote 2 Corinthians, he wrote 1 Corinthians, he said, "Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order in the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. And when I come, whomsoever ye shall approve by your letters, them will I send to bring your liberality," that's your offering, "unto Jerusalem. And if it be meet that I go also, then they shall go with me. Now I will come unto you when I shall pass through Macedonia. For I do pass through Macedonia, and it may be that I will abide, yea, in winter with you, that ye may bring me on my journey whithersoever I go. Well, I will not see you now by the way, but I trust to tarry a while with you, if the Lord permit. But I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost." What he's doing here, he's telling the Corinthian church, you want to get in on this? You want to get in on this fellowship of the ministering to the poor saints in Jerusalem? Okay, here's how you do it. First day of the week, everybody when you come to church, just lay a little bit aside, just a little bit extra, so that nobody will have to gather anything when I come. I mean, just leave it there. It's the same thing I'm teaching the churches over in Galatia to do and other places. Just lay aside a little bit, and everything will be okay. And it won't take long before we get this money together and we're able to take it to Jerusalem. Okay, that's one place. Look back over to the book of Romans. In the book of Romans, you have the same thing. Paul's talking about the same thing. Romans chapter, it's chapter 15. Okay, verse 24. 15, verse 24. He says, "Whensoever I take my journey into Spain, I will come to you. For I trust to see you in my journey, and to be brought on my way thitherward by you, if first I be somewhat filled with your company." I think Paul liked to be filled with company. He liked to visit with people, "But now I go unto Jerusalem," see it, "to minister unto the saints. For it had pleased them of Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the poor saints which are at Jerusalem. It hath pleased them verily, and their debtors they are. For if the Gentiles have been made partakers of their spiritual things, their duty is also to minister unto them in carnal things. Now, when therefore I have performed this, and have sealed to them this fruit, I will come by you into Spain." And this is what he's talking about. He's talking about that same offering. So, if I can kind of put this together for you, what you had happening was that Paul was saying to the churches over in Galatia, and the church in Ephesus, and the church in Corinth, and the church in Rome, and all the other churches that he went through, let's get this offering together, and let's take it to the poor people down in Jerusalem, so they can know our love, so they can have their needs met, so that God's work will be honored, so that it'll keep going. Okay, that's what they wanted. That's what Paul wanted to do. Now, mind you, there was one church he did not ask to be a part of this offering. One church. One church only. Okay? He asked the Corinthians to get in on it. You know why? They're rich. Corinthians had money. He asked the Ephesians to get in on it. You know why? They had money. He asked a whole bunch of churches to get in on it that had money. Makes sense, doesn't it? Somebody has got money, giving some money to give to somebody who has no money down in Jerusalem. That makes sense. James?
I would say that the one that didn't make it net is the one that was poor.
You've got it. There was one poor church that he did not ask to get in on this offering. And that church was the church of Macedonia. He didn't ask them. Really? Yeah, that's what we just read. I'm back in 2 Corinthians now. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, he's writing to the Corinthians and he says, brethren, we want you to know about the grace of God that's bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. How that in a great trial of affliction, that's Macedonians had a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy, they were still a happy church, and their deep poverty. They had nothing. I mean, they were in deep poverty, abounded unto the riches of their liberality. They got together a big offering. Okay, and this was something that Paul didn't ask them to do. In fact, they just did it on their own. Look at verse 5. And this they did not as we hoped. The meaning of that is, Paul got thinking about this project. He's thinking it through. He's thinking to himself, we got to help the churches over there in Jerusalem. What can we do? Okay, good idea. This church and that church. Oh, we can get together a good offering and we can take it to them and they can see how much we love them and we'll meet their needs and God's word will be honored. Oh, let's do this. They had that as the idea. And he said, but, oh man, I can't ask the Macedonians because the Macedonians, they got no money. I mean, you can't get blood out of a turnip, can you? I mean, you're not going to get something out of nothing. I mean, there's got to be something there in the first place, right? That was the idea that was there. So he's not going to ask the poor church. He's not going to ask Macedonia. But here's what happened. Okay, I'm in Ephesus. This is Ephesus right here. I'm going to act this out. Okay, and over there's Corinth. We'll put Corinth over here. Da-da-da-da-da. Now I'm in Corinth. There's a bunch of water in between. Okay? And while he's in Ephesus, he's writing 1 Corinthians. And he's writing them a letter about getting this offering around. I read it to you in 1 Corinthians 16. Okay? He's writing that offering, about that offering. And he hands it over to Titus, and he said, now Titus, run that over to the Corinthians and see how they're doing. So Titus, he doesn't go by water. Instead, he comes out here towards Henry, and he goes this way. He crosses a little bit of water, and he's now into land in Macedonia. Okay? And he comes and he has some fellowship with the Macedonian believers before he goes on down to Corinth. He's not to Corinth yet. He's on the way. Okay? He stopped by way of Gastonia on the way to Shelby. Oh, wait. Okay, maybe that'd be the way it would be. But he's leaving from Ephesus, going through Macedonia, and coming down to, what was that place? Corinth, yeah, over there. It slipped my brain. It was gone, man. It was just not there. Okay, so while he's doing this, while he's going there, well, Titus we're talking about now, he's talking with the Macedonian believers, and they're saying, now, what's the news? Why are you coming this way? And they're saying, well, I got some business down here at Corinth. Oh, what's going on? And somehow they find out about this offering. And after he leaves, Paul's still over here, and Titus is over in Corinth. These Macedonian believers, they get talking about it. And they're going, doesn't that just make you mad? Paul didn't ask us to get in on this offering. We wouldn't be able to give much, but we ought to be able to give something. James?
So they passed the kitty net and they got enough money net for them to get through.
You got it. You got it. But they didn't have any money, right? But they just had a little bit. But they started passing the hat, you know? And I don't have my hat today, but they probably, you got yours, okay? But they passed the hat around. And as they passed the hat, little by little, there was some that came in, and they go, look what God gave us. And the next Sunday, when they came back together again, so-and-so said, you know, I put some money in the offering, and next thing I know, this happened, and I got the money back. And so they passed the hat again, and they put more in. And the same thing happened. Another brother over here said, you know, I put money in the offering, and last week and this week, God gave it to me back. And it wasn't long before they were all doing it, and the next thing you know, the hat wasn't big enough. I mean, there was just so much that came in that they go, wow, this is how God does it. This is how God blesses us when we give. James.
So, all the time that all the people that they were putting money in the thing, they got all their money back.
From God.
Yes.
Isn't that cool? That's the coolest thing about how God did that. God just gave them the money back. They put it in, God gave it back. I love to use this illustration of George Mueller. George Mueller was a man that took care of orphans. Before he died, he had 2,000 orphans he was taking care of. And he never asked anybody for any money. He only asked God for money. And God always met his need. And somebody said, well, how in the world did that work? Mr. Mueller, how did that work? He said, well, and you know in those days they shoveled coal. You know what I mean? They burned coal, and so they'd shovel coal with big shovels, coal shovels, like that. So Mr. Mueller answered the man and said, well, it's like this. Whenever God gives me something, I put in my shovel and I give it right back to God. And the person said, I don't understand how that works. Oh, he says it's real easy. God has a bigger shovel than I do. So, like, he would shovel it to God, and God would shovel it back, and he'd shovel more, and God'd shovel it back, and that's how he took care of those orphans.
Yeah, but I heard another thing that people did odd jobs and that, and they got their money back that way too.
Well, maybe so. That's probably true. But I'm telling you, this thing worked for the Macedonia. Okay, so here comes Paul. Paul decides he's going to make this trip from Ephesus finally, and he comes around there and he gets into Macedonia. And when he gets into Macedonia, they meet him and they say, Brother Paul, we got to tell you what happened. And he said, well, what happened? I said, well, we heard about this fellowship of the ministering to the saints, this offering that you're taking up. We heard about that, and well, I know you didn't ask us to get in on it, but we wanted to get in on it. So I'll tell you what, we took up a little offering. And Paul said, now, isn't that nice? I'm sure that just blessed his heart. He didn't ask them to, but they did it anyway. And so then he said, oh, thank you. And then Paul said, exactly how much was it? And they told him how much it was, and he goes, okay, I'm losing my hearing. I need some hearing aids, but I don't have money to buy them. So would you say that again? And he told him how much it was, and he said, that much? And they said, yeah, that much. I have no idea how much. But then he said to all these Macedonians, he said, I can't take it. I can't take it. You all need this money. You all are as poor as they are down in Jerusalem. I can't take your money. And they said to him, but Paul, you have to. God gave us this money for this project. It's not ours. When we gave a little bit, God gave more, and we gave that, and God gave more, we gave that, and God gave more. Next thing you know, it's a big amount. We can't take it back. You have to take it and give it to those people in Jerusalem. So Paul goes, all right, I guess I have to. Now you see, did you read it? Let me read it again. Brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, how that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And this they did, not as we hoped, but they first gave their own selves to the Lord and unto us by the will of God. And that's how it was done. Isn't that the strangest thing you ever saw? That God would give them that much money when they had nothing? You know, it's really something to think about. But anyway, Paul said, man, we got a problem now. He kind of was standing there talking to some of the men that came with him. He said, we got a problem now. And they said, what's the problem, Paul? Well, you know, these guys are going to take this big offering along with the offering from over here, and we're going to go to Corinth, And Paul's thinking, I just bet you that they're not ready. Okay? They're not ready. I mean, they're sitting there saying, we got plenty of time. We know Paul told us to set aside a little every week, but we got lots of time. We got lots of money. We can get it around when he comes. And Paul's worried that when he gets down there with these poor Macedonians coming to the rich church, that these people here are going to be ashamed. Now, he loved them both. He loved the Macedonians and he loved the Corinthians. But he's afraid that they're going to be ashamed because the Macedonians gave so much more, and these guys are kind of like, do, kind of wasting their time, you see. So he says, man, I got to write them about this. And so in his letter, 2 Corinthians, which he sent from up here in Macedonia and sent it down there, he spends 2 whole chapters, chapter 8 and chapter 9, just telling these guys, you need to get this around. Look what he says here. He says in verse 7, therefore, as ye abound in everything, I mean, you guys are good in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all diligence and in your love to us. Hint, hint, see that ye abound in this grace also. And he says in verse 8, I speak not by command. I'm not trying to command you about this, but by occasion of the forwardness of others and to prove the sincerity of your love. I want to know, do you guys really on board with this? Do you really want to give or not? Do you really love the brothers or not? And here I give my advice, verse 10. For this is expedient for you who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago. Now, therefore, perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have. For if there be at first a willing mind, is it accepted? That's good. You see how he's going here? And he keeps talking that way all the way down. He's saying, guys, hey, hello, you rich guys down there in Corinth. Hey, the poor guys are coming. You better get it around or you're going to look like dirt. That's basically what he's saying to them, okay? Now, you can read the rest of this, and I don't know what you plan on preaching next week or whatever, but when you go on down through 8 and you get into chapter 9, I mean, he just keeps it up. He doesn't let them out. Look at this. Look at chapter 9 there. He goes in verse 3, yet have I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain on this behalf, that as I said, ye may be ready, lest haply, if they of Macedonia come with me and find you unprepared, that is not to say, that we, not say ye, should be ashamed at the same confident boasting. Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort. I mean, he just doesn't quit. He just stays on this. It's like he has to say it over and over. It's sort of like your mother when you're growing up. Did you make that bed? Hey, did you make that bed? I told you an hour ago to make that bed. Your sister made her bed. You know, like that. You gonna make yours? Huh? I'm going to give a reward. I wonder who I'm going to give it to. Maybe I'll give it to your sister instead of you. You see? It's almost like that. Hey, Corinthians, did you make your bed? Did you promised to be a part of this. Are you part of it or not? All right. I'm telling you, you better get it around. The Macedonians, they already took care of it. Don't know about you. And he keeps on telling them over and over and over. 2 chapters worth. Well, you say, what's the application for us? All right, look around here. None of us have a lot of money. Not in this room. Okay, I know of no one here that makes Albie? Does he? No. Rosario went like this to him. None of us have a lot of money in this room. Now, I mean, you know it. I know it. I mean, nobody here makes a 6-figure salary, whatever that is. Never seen it in my life. Don't expect to. Okay? None of us has a lot of money in the bank. We are those kind of people that live paycheck to paycheck. You know, if it's there, it's there. If it ain't, it ain't. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes there's no paycheck at all. I mean, that's the way a lot of us live. You know? That's it. Let's be honest. I'm looking at a bunch of Macedonians. American Macedonians. That's what I'm looking at.
Amen.
Yeah. I agree. My car, I drive a car. I'm thankful I have a car, okay? It has 248,000 miles on it. And I say to myself, oh, Lord, just keep this thing going because I don't have the money to replace it. I really don't. You say, where'd you get 248,000? It's a long story, but part of it is Charlotte, okay? I've had that car for a while, and it's made a lot of trips between here and the college over here to Charlotte, and I put on a lot of miles. Of course, I got family up in Pennsylvania. Got to go see them, too, and so whoop, 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 all this, and next thing you know, 248,000. God has been gracious. I've hit one deer, okay, 2 deer. We've had 2 deer, haven't we? I hit a raccoon that messed up the front, messed up the radiator. So a big raccoon ran over top of that. I had, what else? Huh?
The rabbit.
Oh, now that was that other vehicle that I hit a rabbit. That rabbit committed suicide. I mean, he really did. He thought he was going to jump to clear our car coming like that and splat right into the grill and right into the radiator, you know. I mean, this is what happened. That was that other car. James.
Also, not where you got mileage on your car, that is also by seeing the Koreans.
Yes, because I would leave from here and go down to the Korean church and come back, and that's like a half an hour down, half an hour back like that. So I got a car. All right. If you see us drive that other one, that's actually my son's car. We're just keeping it for a little bit, but we got to give it back. Okay, so we're just keeping it on the road. It was sitting, and now we said we could use it, so we put it on the road. I just pay the insurance on it. But, I look at that and I say, okay, I'm thankful that I have a car. At least I have a car. I am thankful for that. So I don't know if that puts me in a different category because a lot of you all don't have a car. Okay, I understand that. But I know like Josh there, he doesn't have a car. But you also don't have a license. Yeah, it takes a license if you're going to have a car. But there you go. But what I'm saying to you is we are Macedonians. We are, in an American context, we don't have a lot of money. We are up against it in many ways. Okay? So what are we going to do about ministering to the saints? Are we going to take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints? Uh-oh, now is where the rubber meets the road. You don't mean to give when I ain't got nothing. Isn't that what I just read about here? About a church that gave when it didn't have anything? God resupplying them. Boy, does that take a lot of faith. That's asking God to give grace. That's what he gave. This is grace giving. This isn't giving out of your riches. This is grace giving. It's giving out of nothing. Okay? I mean, could I possibly try God on this? Okay? All right. And that's where the application has to come. You individually before God, you have to decide whether you're going to be involved in taking care of mission work or you're involved in giving here at the church or involved in giving in any way. But the way to do it is to trust God, not just say it, but to actually do it. Okay? And it is at this point that I'm going to give a story. But first I'm going to take James.
Also, when you were at the other church and that you were pleading to God and that you would get some money for this church.
That's right. And we have seen God answer prayers here. Amen. When we had nothing. And God supplied those things. You are so right, James. Yeah, that's what happens. Let me tell you a story. You don't know my father. Okay, if my father were alive today, he would be 102 years old. Okay? I'm 64. So I was the last of the brood that was born. My dad was 38 when I was born. Okay? When my dad was old and could not live by himself anymore, I was pastoring a church in Pennsylvania. And during that time, we took my dad into our home. We took care of him. He had a lot of needs. He was 85, 86, 87, 88, right in there. During that time, sometimes I would take him back to his house, but other times he stayed with us, and then finally he just stayed with us. And we took care of him. He was pretty sharp, but sometimes, when you get old, you start seeing things and talking funny and things like that, and he got into that. Yeah. But anyway, he was a godly man. He loved the Lord. Well, he started going blind. He had macular degeneration. That's what they called it. That's where you get that blood behind your retina, and it makes it so you can't see. And he became legally blind. Okay? He couldn't drive anymore. He couldn't do anything. So he had me become his power of attorney. All right, that means that I could sign the checks, I could pay his bills, I could do things. When I signed a check, I had to write Oscar W. Johnston by Norman L. Johnston, P.O.A. P.O.A. means power of attorney. And I could do business for him. The first time, my dad had Social Security. He was getting $1,100 a month Social Security. And where he had worked, he had $100 coming a month in for that. So my dad was living on $1,200 a month. Now that's all he had. He didn't have anything else. He did have the family farm was paid for, and later on we sold that, but after he passed away. But at this time, that was all his income was. Okay?
How old was he?
What was that?
How old was he when he died?
Okay, he was 89 when he died. Okay, so he was almost 90. Okay? All right, so he died in February. February 6th. Okay, so anyway, first time he had me write a check. He said, now, and he had expenses. He had like Medicare, supplemental insurance, and different things that he had to pay out. And he still had the house, and we still had to pay the electric on the house, and things like that. Taxes, there's different things. He said, now, I want you to write the tithe check to the church. Okay, I said, that's good. And I said, so we're talking about 10%, right? And he said, yep, $120. I said, okay. So I started to write that tithe check for the church, $120. He said, wait, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing the tithe check. He said, he was kind of, I was his son, so he kind of like, no, he could be kind of tough with me in a way he wouldn't be with other people. He said, don't do that. I said, well, what am I supposed to write, Dad? He said, you got to put the faith promise in there. See, he had done this thing with Pastor John's been talking about supporting missionaries by just giving the extra. He said, you go on ahead and you put that in there. I said, okay, how much is that? And he said, $40. I said, okay. So I started to write a check for $160, $120 and $40. He said, now wait, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing a check. He said, no, like this. I can still hear him. He said, now you got to get $2 in there for the Christian school. They had a Christian school at the church he was at, and he always gave him $2 a month. And $2 for that missionary working with Jews up in Canada. I have no idea who that was. Okay, so that was $2 more and $2 more. That made it 44 or 164. So I started to write the check for 164. What are you doing? I said, I'm writing a check, Dad. He said, no. What did you write it for? I said, 164. He said, why did you write it for 164? I said, Dad, you said 120 for tithe, 40 for faith promise, 2 and 2. That's 164. He said, no, it's not 40 a month. It's 40 a week. And I'm like, whoa, like this. So, and it was $2 a week, too, for both those other ones. So it was 44 a week, okay, that he's just giving to this extra stuff, all right? And not the regular tithe, not the stuff he normally send to the church, but extra for missions and that kind of stuff. So I wrote out the check. I think that month it was, 270 some or something like that. And I said, man, how is this man living? How in the world can he eat? How can he take care of himself? But I did this all the time. He had a little bit of a cushion in a bank account. Well, then he got to the point we couldn't keep him at home. And close by where I pastored, there was a nursing home. It was run by a godly lady, had her kids in our Christian school there in Pennsylvania. So she said, you put him in over here and we'll take good care of him. And I went every day to see him. I went every day to see my dad and spend time with him. And we did a lot of talking. I still was his power of attorney. But you know, when you go to a nursing home, there goes your money. I mean, if you had any money at all, it goes right out the door.
My dad was in a nursing home and that, and he lived there for 5 years and that, and he died September 16th and that, he was 95 years old.
95. 5 years, okay? See, my dad wasn't in that long before he passed away. He got pneumonia and it ruined his lungs and then he passed away. That's how it happened. But okay, so he's in there and I'm going to visit him regularly. I'm still writing the checks, and you know that Social Security and that kind of stuff doesn't, or Medicaid doesn't kick in until after you have no money, okay? And you have to be just down to nothing. And
Sometimes Medicaid
won't do it anyway.
won't work at all.
Right, won't do it anyway, that's right. And it wasn't going to work for Dad because he still owned the farm. See, they would take the farm before they give him anything for that, see? Okay, so here I am. I know my story's a little long, but I'm almost done. Here we go. Here's what happened. It came January, and we'd run out of money, okay? There wasn't any more in his account. No, I didn't have any, okay, that's for sure. Oh, we'd run out of money. And here we go. We're coming up on the end of January. We're going to have to make a payment February 1. Well, I'd gone to the bank and I'd said, you know, he owns a farm. Could we borrow against the farm? And they gave me a line of credit, I don't know if you know what this means, to borrow against the farm so I could take care of his needs there in the nursing home. Okay?
But you sold the farm first, right?
Well, no, couldn't sell it yet. Nope, it was still all tied up. It was all there. But anyway, there you go. I had that, but I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to have to do it. So it came up February 1. It's time to pay the nursing home. And there was no money except the borrowed money, and I didn't want to do it. Okay? January 31, the mail comes. And here in the mail is this real official-looking thing. Now, I didn't know what it was. I opened it up, and here's a check made out to my dad. He never got a check like that before for $13,000. I'm like, what's this? Well, I finally figured out that a couple years before, there had been some settlement from where he had worked about their retirement or something, and it had taken a couple years for it to finally kick in, and on that day, it kicked in. That's the day I got it, the day I needed it. So that $13,000, I put it in the bank account, I went over and paid for that final thing there at that month in February in 2002, paid for that. And then Dad passed away on February the 6th. And when I settled up everything that had to do with his funeral, the $13,000 paid for it all. Dad died without owing a dime to anyone. Can you imagine?
It's almost like saying that your money is buried with you.
Almost, because he used it his whole life, right? Okay, you know what I saw by that? This was a man that was trying to do God's work. He was doing a Macedonian. He was out of nothing, he was giving. Out of nothing, he was giving. And God took care of him till the day he died. That's what I saw. Now, folks, each one of us are individually. Like my dad had to make that decision. Each one of us individually will have to decide what we're going to do. I hope you'll pray about it. This is, Lord, teach us to pray. And the Lord does teach us to pray. But I think our prayer ought to also be, Lord, teach us how to give. We don't know. We don't know God's ways in this. So I think we just need to really put that before the Lord as well. I want you to think about this. This is one of these think about type sermons. I want you to think about it. What can I do? What would you have me to do, Lord? And to see what can be done here, okay? All right, we can talk about it more after the service, but let me pray right now, okay? Dear Father, I ask you to take the lesson that is here from the Corinthians and the Macedonians, that you will take this particular part of the Bible and help us to see how we can apply this to our own lives. Dear Lord, help us in this. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.